The Pfizer CEO went to President Trump and said, "Plank, here's $70 billion I'm going to give you over the next 7 years." Of course he got his way. Money talks in Washington. And I know physicians don't like it because it's inherently inappropriate, it's uncouth, it's douchey, it's gauche, it's all the things that no one wants. It lacks class.
Well, it's organized bribery is what it is.
That's what
I
it
think
is.
Every American knows that, but nobody seems to be able to do anything about it.
We know it, and yet we could also do it to do the right things, and we don't.
I agree with that.
If you're a doctor, you didn't go to medical school to become a business strategist. But here's the problem. If you don't understand healthcare economics, someone else is making off your work, money off of your work, and you're getting squeezed. Today, we're breaking down the actual tools and tactics independent physicians are using to fight back. Welcome back to Vital Discourse. I'm Dr. Lee Mandel, along with Dr. Ben Salento. Today, we're once again joined by Dutch Rojas. Dutch, again, is the host of the Rojas Report podcast. Dutch has built a reputation for cutting through the usual talking points and focusing on what actually drives healthcare in this country: incentives, control, pricing, and power. He's written and spoken extensively about physician autonomy, consolidation, transparency, direct contracting, and why so many independent doctors feel like they are practicing inside a system designed to weaken them. So I'm going to start with a story that I spoke about last episode. If everyone remembers that saw it, we talked about the Affordable Care Act, and we talked about how it came into being, what it did provide, what it didn't provide. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about, well, how do we get out of this? How do we make things better again? And the story that I told, I think, was really a good starting point, a good jumping off point for that. So what I spoke about was a patient that I saw, an 18-year-old girl, a few weeks ago. And when she came into my office, she had seen another ENT, ear, nose, and throat physician in the area, and she had a right cheek sinus or maxillary sinus tumor. She was told that it was likely cancer. She was sent down to the local university. At the local university, they told her, yes, we think it's likely cancer, and we're going to have to do a big surgery. They went to get authorization from the insurance company. The insurance company denied the authorization. The hospital system went back to this 18-year-old girl's mother and said, it will be $100,000 for your daughter to have surgery here and get cured. The mother went back to the original ear, nose, and throat physician. He wrote a strong letter saying this must be done at the university. The insurance company went ahead and said, no. Send this to Dr. Mandel. She came to me. I looked at her scan. Did not look to me like it was cancerous. I did the procedure. It took me 30 minutes. It was not cancer. We fixed the problem.
For a lot less money.
For a lot less money. Yes, certainly not $100,000, not even a fifth. Okay. So here's the question. Dutch, how do we fix this?
Wow, well, that's a loaded question. But, the good news is it's all fixable. I think when a system is designed to extract revenue, right, and I use the word extract on purpose, then I think there's actual solutions. And they start with honesty, integrity, appropriateness, character, all the things that most physicians learn in life and in med school. And so, yeah, I'm excited to be on the pod, and I'm excited to talk to you guys about the different solutions that exist.
So, physician, being squeezed, as we talked about in the last episode, from the standpoint of the Affordable Care Act, seemed to be pushing larger groups, pushing everyone going to universities. How does an independent, first of all, should there be independent physicians? Is that a model that's even?
Yeah. What's the most efficient delivery of care system?
Yeah. I mean, were they right? Should we be just pushing everyone into big groups? They have more power in terms of dealing with the insurance companies, negotiation, and that type of thing.
Does a bigger group mean more efficient care at a lower cost? In my In my perception, that's not the case. I'm far less expensive, to your point, Lee, than a big hospital because of the massive facility fees that they generate. In my office, I can see people rapidly. I can see it much faster rate. I can do surgeries much faster, get a better outcome at a lower cost. But what do you think, Dutch?
I think we ought to start off with something that's been proven time and time and time again, is health systems are the most expensive to Medicare, to CMS, Centers for Medicare and Medicaid. PE is the second most expensive. And third, and the final choice, is independent practice of medicine. And so you've got beneficiaries, and I posted an Avalere study that was done 2020, end of 2024, Q4 of 24. And it basically said, for the average patient, the differential between health system and private practice is almost 25%. So if you think about how big that number is, right? PE lives somewhere in the middle.
When you say PE, what do you mean?
Private equity.
Right.
And so private equity obviously is bought up. Last we looked, it was about $1 trillion worth of healthcare delivery assets. So not bio, not pharma, but actual healthcare delivery mechanisms, be it hospitals, health systems, whatever that might be. Look, I just think there's so much to cover here. When you guys, of course you did it on purpose, but when you talk about these subjects, right, and you ask these questions, it's, I went to temple yesterday. And so it's like, the rabbi all of a sudden starts talking about the depth of the words, of the meanings that you're reading. And you go, man, I just had no idea. Right. So I hear these questions like, hey, Dutch, solve it. Hey, Dutch, fix it. And I just think, yes, the short answer is free market capitalism. Right. And probably 30% of the country doesn't want to hear that. And then we have to go on and actually explain how that works and why it works. Right. And I do believe that I didn't at first. When I started in 1997, I didn't believe it. Probably around 2006 or 7, I had my moments where I said, hey, the independent practice of medicine is the X factor that I was missing in my calculations. And here's what I mean. You just start working through what creates the best outcomes, who is highly incentivized to create those outcomes, and what does that look like? Right? And if the three of us are just sitting here having a great conversation like we are, we can all say to ourselves, okay, well, who's the lowest priced? By force or by market economy, doesn't matter. It's independent practice of medicine. And then we say, well, who's most incentivized to produce great outcomes? Is it a hospital administrator, a university president, or a physician? Well, the university president carries no risk. No decision that a university president makes costs them anything, unless they do something criminal, right? They might go to prison. A hospital administrator doesn't get in trouble. If he tells the two of you what to do, or she, they're not responsible. The courts will say you're responsible. You're the physicians. You've been trained.
Yeah, you should have known better.
Yeah, and your med mal's on the line.
Yeah.
Right? Your board certification's on the line. Your CEs are on the line. Your continual education's on the line. Everything in your life, and this is what the larger general public doesn't understand, everything a physician does can be immediately taken away if they do not perform.
That's by a governing body. But also,
Yes.
you have immediate feedback with the patients too. I mean, if you don't deliver it properly, if you get a bad result or they just don't like you, they're not going to go to you.
That's right. That's right. I just think the market in general doesn't understand how deep and how wide the incentives are for physicians to do the job well. And then you tack on independent practice of medicine, like, hey, if I don't do a good job, if I'm not nice, these people will never come back. If I'm not on the latest AI, they'll never come back. If I don't try to get the best prices for my equipment and get my costs down, these people will never come back because I won't be here. Right? Like, there is so much intensity driving the independent practitioner. And I'm telling you right now, zero of that exists on the other side of the calculation. Health systems don't have that burden. They just go, we're going to go bankrupt. Hey, American Hospital Association Federation, can you help us? We need some more subsidies. Okay, well, here's $90 billion in Medicaid supplements. Here's $81 billion in 340B. Here's $40 billion in some nonprofit tax exemptions. Well, what does tax exemption mean? Well, I mean, just get some people to do an ALS walk. We'll charge $500 an hour for our nurses. And then, go 5 hours, or just say you went 5 hours. There is no regulatory oversight on what nonprofit health systems submit to the federal government in forms of community service. Zero. Like the three of us are then incentivized just to be like, well, I don't know, go help somebody for free. And then what do you make? Oh, you're a nurse. You make $100,000 a year. We'll charge $500 an hour, right? Because you got to pay for gas, and then we got to do this. Like, it doesn't make any sense. I mean, they're getting everything. And it just is annoying and difficult. So, is there a fix? Well, yeah. But I think there's some things that physicians are missing, and I think there are things we ought to talk about. And so, one of the things I'd like to bring up is, one, we talked about it in the last podcast. What do physicians actually need to learn that will help them be quick, efficient, and deploy these mechanisms on time? Now, I know a lot of people don't want to talk about AI, but I do think artificial intelligence, especially AI orchestration companies, will help the independent practice of medicine a significant deal. And this is one of those things where I didn't have the faith, like people kept talking about it, and then I saw it in action, and I went, there's no way it does all that. No, you wrote a workflow to do that, and I don't have to do that anymore. I remember what it was like to do that.
That's one of the things I wanted to talk to you about, actually, is BAM AI. BAM AI has just been introduced to my practice. It is the most powerful, most modern AI agent that I've ever seen. The technology is only a couple of months old, but it's so powerful that it's going to reduce my practice's overhead and increase our revenue just by its introduction. So I agree with you.
I love that.
AI is
I don't know who BAM is, but I'd love to hear about them and talk
we've
about them.
exploded onto the scene, and I'll talk to you about it in a sec, off camera.
Let me, put my legal hat on for a second here. Just people that, the AI is all over the place. It's growing unbelievably fast. You have AIs like, for example, OpenClaw, where you can do some crazy stuff with it. The problem is the ability to get hacked, the HIPAA issues that run along with it. So people just need to really be very, very careful that you're not opening an exposure that wasn't there before. If you're going to implement something like this, make sure that you have someone from an IT perspective that is very schooled in HIPAA, that will look over this and make sure that you're not opening a doorway or a back door that otherwise you didn't know existed, because that could be a real issue. So most people are going to look towards the enterprise solutions, right?
Yeah, BAM AI has already been vetted in that regard. They're very experienced in the medical space, and so every line item of code is protected at the highest level, and the systems that they put in are closed and not open to the internet. So you have to go with a company that thinks that way, that thinks in a medical perspective. Everyone's going to want to jump into it, but the ones that have a sort of a tried and true track record inside medicine are the ones that are going to have a jump at the starting gun.
Yeah, and I think I know we've talked about it before, but I have no medical training, no clinical experience whatsoever, other than spending a copious amount of time in the OR when I've been called. Hey, Dutch, I only have a few minutes. You need to, so of course I'll go. But all the AI solutions that we ever talk about, certainly that are available, none of them are clinical. None of them are medical. None of them have anything to do with the deployment of healthcare in any way, shape, or form. These are all rudimentary things that every practice ought to do and every business does. And that's what makes it, for me, very powerful. When I look at, I probably ought to come up with a number, but I'm on the road about half the year. In 2024, it was just over 212 days. And I don't know, 340 practices last year. Like, it's a lot. And I love it. I mean, it gives me energy, it gives me excitement, and I love spending time with physicians and operators who want to grow and expand and understand like what all the inherent intrinsic difficulties and challenges are. But with all of that, the deep, dark difficulties that physician practices have are they are really good at operating day-to-day business and absolutely horrendous at strategic thinking. And so part of what solutions like Dr. Ben's do, or solutions that AI orchestration companies come up with, is the ability to do a SWOT analysis, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats, which you learn in basic B school. And you take those and you say, okay, if my weaknesses are strategic, which in my professional assessment is like every independent practice I've ever been to. And then you say, okay, well, how do we deploy AI to do that? Or how do we get people from our community into our practice that really can give us guidance and governance where we need it? And that's where I'm seeing the biggest lift in AI is governance, some compliance, because it'll help you not call a lawyer every 15 minutes and ask lots of questions. There's some things that they could just review after you come up with a big idea. But in saying all that, the thing that doctors do really well is the day-to-day. And so the structural issues that I see going forward and the fixes all have to do with strategy. And the reason I love independent practice isn't only because all the incentives are aligned, because they operate day-to-day in such an incredible way and with such excellence that it makes all the difference in the world. Hospital systems can't operate that way. Now, Dr. Ben and I would talk about what's the difference between a battalion, a company, a platoon, and a fire team. Right? In my fire team, we're way more efficient, way faster, way more mobile. When I was operating on a listening post, I was a radio operator. What did that look like? And how fast could you travel with only one or two other people versus having to travel with 90, 110, 300 people? It's a totally different attack style. And the reason that I think independent practice can win is because we're all mobile. Like the largest practice, like 1,000 doctors. Okay, but that's huge. And there's like 2 of those. The rest of them are sub 5. And we can absolutely win.
And that's the whole point about being nimble, right? You got to be nimble. You got to be able to turn on a dime, right? And to make this a little more granular for the physicians out there, what are we really talking about? We're talking about margin, right? That's what it comes down to. What does the AI do for you? Great if AI helps you with this, helps you with that, but we're talking about over time the financial health of your practice. And the financial health of your practice grows as your margin grows. So if we can decrease costs by bringing in AI, we increase margin, and that's what keeps our practice healthy. Am I stating that correctly?
But that's in a capitalist system, Lee. You're saying it perfectly. But the problem is that we are Han Solo in The Empire Strikes Back. We've shot at some people. We're running towards the blast doors, and the blast doors are closing. Are we going to get under them, or are we going to get pinched by it? And those blast doors is the squeeze that Dutch was talking about in the last episode. So we may work really hard to decrease overhead, only for the next year to find out that we're going to once again get our revenue reduced, our reimbursement reduced. And all of the companies, they keep raising their costs. So these are things that we can do in the short term, but you got to fix the system. You can't constantly go towards this closing window because that's not in our control. We can do things like AI and fire some people, but above and beyond that, if the reimbursement we get is constantly ticking down the way that it is, and the overhead's going up, the writing's on the wall for independent practices. We're eventually going to be non-viable if that keeps happening. So Dutch, we have to somehow fix this system. If you had a magic wand and you could fix the ACA in, let's say, 3 ways, how would you do that to try to stop this so that independent practices would have a chance to not only survive but thrive?
Well, number one, This will sound controversial, but I think the only fix that I would actually bring to the ACA, the only structural fix, is I would remove the moratorium on physician-owned hospitals. The rest of it I would leave in place. And it's not because I don't want to fix the structural inequities that exist in the Affordable Care Act. It's because I don't think they're relevant anymore. I think that we can do things on the private side, which we'll talk about today, that totally get rid of those things and make them absolutely irrelevant, and it won't even matter anymore. And so I think that's kind of where I'm at. Physician-owned hospitals, the moratorium has not been taken seriously. There were, in 2010 when it passed, there were a little over 300 of these hospitals. Today, it's just over 200. But imagine running a hospital and you cannot grow. Like, hey, I run a coffee shop and I sell 1,000 cups of coffee, and the federal government has just decided that 1,000 cups is all I can sell. There's nothing else I can do. Right? And physicians tend to think linearly. They're not architects, if you will, as a general matter. And so their ability to think, well, what can I do outside the system is limited, because what they really care about is, how do I take care of patients? How do I take care of my staff? How do I keep this ship going, this 50,000 square feet of space? And then, can I have a life too? Right? Like, I already went to med school. I'm already busy 60 hours a week. I'd like to see my kids and my wife, or I'd like to see my husband and my kids. Right? I mean, so you've got kind of a whole bunch of things. What I've talked about really for the last year, whether it's at vascular surgery, ortho, neuro, like all these conferences that I get a wonderful chance to speak at, is about removing the structural inequities. And it all begins with payment. And then I'm hoping, we got a great cohort of physicians now, but I'm hoping that the cohort of physicians just grows and continues to get larger, that all of them start thinking the same. There's some inherent lies that we've believed that are not true. And we have to take people like me and we have to go, well, is that really true? So here's a lie that we were told. Physicians cannot work together to get better payer contracting rates. Okay. Well, I believe that, because you know what? I was told that, and I just kind of assumed that it was correct. And then I started looking into it. And then I hired people like are great.
So I thought that there was a moratorium on collective bargaining with doctors, that we weren't allowed to do it.
There is. But there are also wonderful attorneys who will ask the question like, well, what is collective bargaining? What does it mean? What's the spirit of the law? What do the past case laws say? What is anti-kickback? What is Stark? What's collective bargaining? How does it work? And is there a mechanism by which we can take all independent physicians by state? I tried to do it nationally, by the way. That cost a lot of money. It did not work. Cannot do it. At least Entrepreneur Dutch did not figure it out. What we did figure out and did ascertain, after an immense amount of legal bills, by the way, attorneys make a great deal more than physicians, which I find that somewhat offensive, but maybe that's a talk for another day, because Dr. Mandela is both an attorney and a physician. So he was like, hey, I'll take it, you know? But the point being, the point of that little story is not to talk about the legality of, can you do payer contracts and can you organize? It's the idea that we were told something, right? Because I was told this all by very smart, bright people. And then I just made the assumption in my head that that was the truth. I didn't go back and ask myself, well, okay, is that really so? Okay, well, I have $50,000. I'm going to find out. Like, I'm going to hire an attorney and I'm going to figure it out. Okay, well, then we went from hiring one attorney to hiring another one in a different state and another one. So we had three different states, three different opinions. And then guess what it turns out? All three of those attorneys said, this is a really good question. And by the way, the answer is, if you build a professional corporation in an individual state and you follow these rules, and they're large and complex, you can do it.
But what kind of weight does that have with an insurance company?
Well, in Texas, let's take all the Houston MSA. I'm going to say there's 4,000 of you that are independents in Houston. What if you all got together under one tax ID, only for the purposes of payer contracting, not for anything else, not for benefits, not for Medicare, not for Medicaid, not for taxes, not for corporation reasons, but you just came together for that purpose. What does it change? Well, it changes a lot. Let's say you're getting $1.50 commercial Medicare rates, and now there's 1,000 of you, or now there's 1,500 or 2,000 of you. Well, instead of Blue Cross Blue Shield of Texas, who I despise with all my heart and soul, going to having you come to their office, they'll come to yours. The idea is that, can docs work together, right? Can they compete on some level, and can they cooperate on some level to achieve the same leverages that large employers around the country have done? And so people will ask, well, Dutch, show me an example. And I'm like, okay, Land O'Lakes, Ace Hardware. There are thousands of mutuals. In fact, Blue Cross Blue Shield of Texas is a mutual. Now, it's all written in favor of the owners in Illinois, but it is a mutual, and it's supposed to be shareholders that own that company. And you can make that as strict or as loose as you want. Right? And so we started figuring out, well, what if we have a collective? What if we have a mutual type? What does that look like, and what can we do with it? Well, what we discovered was a doc in Texas, a doc in Florida, a doc in New York, a doc in Chicago, and a doc in California can all be on the same benefits platform. It'll look like they're all one single employer. And so we said, okay, let's take these legal opinions, right? Because now you got to get empirical evidence. No doctor's just going to sign up and let you just do it on like, hey, could you be the test case? Well, the good news for me was that I'm on the board of PHA, Physician-Led Healthcare for America. It's a lobbying group for independent physicians. One of the hospitals said, we'll try it. And we had really good results. Well, then 2 hospitals said, we'll try it. And then 3. And then, well, whatever we have today, 7 or 8. Right? So it's not huge, but it's not a small number because a lot of people work in a hospital.
And that does what? That helps physicians get higher pay?
So the payer contracting in each state helps them get higher pay, better commercial contracts. The benefits platform helps them pay less and get more, right? The payroll company helps them streamline their HR, and the HR company helps them streamline their processes. So everything in my brain is designed to reduce costs and increase revenues. And all of that is on the main idea of leverage, right? Why do people go to work for a health system? Well, I hear it all the time from the orthos. Well, my pay is going to double. And I go, well, if you understood how they doubled your pay and you could do that in private practice, would you stay in private practice? Well, of course I would, but Dutch, that's impossible. Well, is it? Is it? So what I did was when I sold the last company, Sono Surgery, in Q3 of 22, I got a whole bunch of airline tickets and I went to see a little over 70 practices, including physician-owned hospitals, ASC partners, ASC development companies. And I just asked them what their largest problems were on the business side of healthcare. And it's what all of you guys say. Well, okay, I got overhead. What does that look like? Well, my overhead looks like rent. My overhead looks like payroll. My overhead is benefits and then professional insurances. We had a long conversation. We built a med-mal captive. And I went to all of these groups and I asked them, and these are sophisticated people. They're not dumb in any sense of the word. They're just unexposed. And what I love about podcasts like this is like we get to help them become educated. So, med-mal has generally, as a general matter, has been a great insurance tool for the carriers. But it hasn't returned not $1 back to you guys. Now, there's some that give back dividends. But I'm like, why can't we have a physician-owned med-mal captive? Like, I'll set it up. I'll get paid for it, right? But I'll make it all transparent. If somebody doesn't like that I made a few $1 million off helping people get $100 million back, well, that's their problem, right? We'll find enough participants. How do we do that? How do we really start underwriting med-mal really well? Same for workers' comp. Same for general liability. And so the answer to all of these questions about fixing is, well, what problem are we trying to fix? But can we take the answers that PE gives us, private equity? Can we take the answers that health systems give us, and can we maximize those results for the independent practice of medicine? So my speech for the last year has been, you guys have to learn to cooperate where you can cooperate, and you have to keep competing where you're competing. Because as long as I've been in this business, just since 1997, not very long, doctors have literally just competed head to head.
And there's the rub.
And that's a common thing. I want to unpack something that you said, though. So you said you would only take away the moratorium on ownership of hospitals and leave everything else the same. And we're talking about overhead. I mean, for the last 30 years, essentially, from the sustainable growth rate to the yearly lowering, doctors are getting less on the fee schedule, regardless of how from CMS. So it's 2.5, 3.6, 4.1 every single year. You add that up over the last 30 years, we have a massive drop in reimbursement for physicians. And the commercial payers, they are always a multiple of this. So it affects, it percolates throughout the entire system. I mean, to me, I would want to change that. I think that that's one of the first things that you have to do is stabilize that type of pre-programmed reduction in isolation of the rest of healthcare, because we are not the bulk of the healthcare dollar. The physicians are a very small part of it. It's devices and hospitals and administration and drugs. And so continually whittling away at what we make is not only tying our hands in terms of having the money to organize, like you're saying, but also remain viable out in the community where I believe it's the most efficient care.
I don't disagree with you, but I'll reframe it in my way for you. The reason I wouldn't change it is because we could change it today, but physicians refuse to work together. So I could name a dozen associations that raise less than $250,000 a year. There's 1,056,000 licensed physicians. Now, in the Marine Corps, you and I would use different words that I'm going to use right now. Right now, I'm going to be nice. But if I was just in a group, right, I would not be as nice. But basically, like, you guys have all of the power. You take care of all of the patients, and yet you leverage none of it. Like, I've said this over and over again over the last 10 years. You guys could be one of the most powerful lobbies in Washington, D.C., yet you refuse. And so the reason I wouldn't change it is because the mechanism for changing it already exists. And if physicians would stop fighting with each other and say, you know what, so the average, the pay for physicians is somewhere between $350 and $750. Let's call that the right and left, right, variance. There's no way in the world anyone can convince me that every physician on the planet or in the United States can't contribute $1,000, $2,500, $5,000. Some would easily do $50 or $100K if they saw the value in it, right? And if you have $1 million, like, okay, take $1 billion up there. Now you've beaten the American Medical Association and the American Hospital Association, and yet you refuse.
So the American Medical Association is supposed to be that vehicle.
Yeah, but it's not, and everybody knows.
The problem is that it's been hijacked by some of the same thought process people that gave us the ACA. I mean, they basically just rubber stamp anything that comes out of Washington. They don't represent what most doctors want. And so, if we create another organization, who's to say that it's not going to get taken over and go the same route? It doesn't appear to me that that we're able to take what you're saying and put it into an organization that every one of the million docs can trust. Is that fair to say that? How do we ensure that?
Well, I don't know if you could ever ensure it.
I have no idea.
But you certainly could for 5 years, right? I would create an entity, and I've done this in the past, where I said, look, our entity is going to exist for 5 years, because what happens is that it always, like AI, right? Organizations hallucinate. And they get full of themselves, and they think they're the greatest thing since sliced bread. It's like when I made a bunch of money on Tesla, I looked at my wife and I go, I don't even know why I'm working. I just made all this money on this stock. I'm the greatest trader ever. No, you dippy. You just got lucky. you invested in Tesla a long time ago and you made a pile of money. That's how, like, that doesn't make you anything. Well, look, if for 5 years we just agreed that we were going to contribute and we were going to have good governance, the good Dr. Mandel can write our governance documents for us and help us, then we create rules and we do the right things. And then we say in 5 years, we're done. But look, the Pfizer CEO went to President Trump and said, "Paplank, here's $70 billion I'm going to give you over the next 7 years." Of course he got his way. Money talks in Washington. And I know physicians don't like it because it's inherently inappropriate. It's uncouth. It's douchey. It's gauche. It's all the things that no one wants. It lacks class.
It's organized bribery is what it is.
That's what
I
it
think
is.
Every American knows that, but nobody seems to be able to do anything about it.
We know it, and yet we could also do it to do the right things, and we don't.
I agree with that.
That's why I said I didn't want to change it. It wasn't because I don't believe what you believe or think what you think. It's just I'm like, well, the mechanism's there to fix it. We just don't want to do the other side of the work, right? On the algebra, what you do.
We want somebody else to fix it for us.
Oh.
And that's what we're hoping. Please be good to us, and we're not taking it up in arms. The other thing I wanted to ask you, though, not just the continual and pre-programmed reduction in doctor reimbursement, but also the fact that that facilities are able to set a very different set of rates for themselves versus private practice, and that there are facility fees that somehow are growing out of control, making the disparity between what the facilities get and what the doctor actually performing the care gets. And I would like to see that transparent and normalized across sites. I've heard you say that in the past. I expected it to come out of your mouth. I'm really interested to find out what was behind you not putting it in your this would fix healthcare statement.
What part is that? I'm missing it. I think I'm missing it.
The point is normalizing payments and making them transparent. In other words, so site neutral. You have essentially site neutral payments. If you're going to do a procedure in a hospital or at my center, if I do a CT scan, I get the same amount that Memorial Hermann gets for it.
You've just said the name of one of the health systems I dislike the most. Yes, I do. No, look, most the policy wonks in Washington and the socialists and communists who don't like price transparency will all say, well, what's price transparency going to change? And it's because they're fixated on a premise that price transparency is about patients. I think it's true for 5%. But for 95% of it, it's for entrepreneurs, it's for builders, it's for Silicon Valley types. And here's what I mean. If you give me all the data on every cancer patient ever, can I build a product that helps cancer patients pay less? Can I help them streamline the process, and can I help them build better navigation? Well, the answer is, of course I can, because I have data. There's three things to any functioning market. Number one, there's a direct-to-patient market. Direct-to-consumer is what they call it, D2C, right? And we just call it direct-to-patient. Number two is B2B, business-to-business. We don't have either of those two in healthcare. And we sure don't have business-to-institutions, right? And so one of the issues, and I know we haven't talked about it yet, but we talk about Trump RX, Cost Plus by Mark Cuban. There's another great company that I forget the guys. Zach Zeller runs it down in the hill country of Texas. These are all really wonderful pharmacy programs that reduce expenses for patients in a direct-to-consumer model and a business-to-business model. But they don't really change the way things are done. So let's pick on Trump RX because most of the audience knows that we can be neutral on these things. Trump RX fixes it by decree. I'm going to write a rule and we're going to pay less. But the next president comes in who's a socialist and goes, hopefully not. Hopefully we get a Marine in there. But let's say we don't win and we get a socialist, right? And they go, undo that. Well, it's undone because it's not structured by market. But now let's say we build a commodities exchange for pharmaceuticals. Now everything is just as you described. Costs are open. Everything's transparent. You can't hide anything. I mean, think about if we sold oil and gas the way we sell healthcare services. Everybody be in prison is what would happen. I mean, you think the oil and gas cartels wouldn't jack up the prices to these crazy numbers if they could? They're already inherently kind of, perceived as evil people, the people in oil and gas. That's my whole side of the family. And so we have to look at what works, and people will say, well, Dutch, how does a commodities exchange? And I go, listen, you don't understand the functions of the market, right? When I go to a self-funded employer and I look at their utilization data, I go, okay, well, you used 1 million labs. By the way, we consume about 15 billion labs a year in the United States. You used a million labs. You used 150,000 MRI, CTs, PET scans, and X-rays. You used, 200,000 gastroenterology visits. And you had, 500,000 physician consults. There's 1.2 billion a year. Right? And now all of a sudden you have this and you have a functioning market. The average American uses 20 scripts a year. Okay, so I used one last year, so someone else is using a whole bunch. Well, what if you put all this on a commodity exchange so that large buyers could buy and large sellers could sell? But it helps doctors because if you own an ASC or a surgical hospital, and I'm a large company, and I go and buy 50 total joints from you, what happens to you? Right now, you can plan for the next 3 or 4 or 5 years. And you know what's amazing is we have problems with balance sheets in private practice. Well, we wouldn't have any balance sheet problems anymore. We'd have real value in our practices other than the physician's hands and doing what they do. So we're missing some key market initiatives that I think we need. But in order to start there, we have to band physicians together. We got to kind of find some glue and some stickiness. And I was hoping that,
I'm so glad we unpacked this, Dutch. It's a really important point. When you first said it, I was alarmed that it was too simplistic. But I agree with you 100% on listening to you go through each aspect of it in toto. What you're saying is that whatever decisions we make, we've got to start acting as a unit and start pulling the rope in the same direction at the same time in this tug of war, or we're never going to have any foothold or any voice.
Well, I think you and I inherently or intrinsically understand that because we were both Marines, and you know the difference between, hey, I got myself, or I got 5 guys, or I got an entire weapons company behind me, and look what I can achieve. I mean, I remember being 18, 19 and seeing an A-10 go overhead, and then artillery, and then because I'm old, it was tow missiles. And all of a sudden you start seeing the devastation and the power. And then you think, okay, well, now I'm a single doc and I practice in Florida. I'm a single doc and I practice in Texas. I'm a single doc and I'm in California. No one knows my pain. No one. Well, what if you bring them all together? What happens then? I don't want to call it a system. I call it a collaborative. No one's in charge, right? Me and the docs for our collaborative called MedMerge, we just picked some physicians to be in charge. And we said, look, it lives on a finite scale. We're going to go 3 years. And if we like what's going on, we'll go another 3. But there's some ideas behind bringing everybody together because you have so many docs that are averse to cooperation. But then I tell them, look, I'm not your enemy. The other doctors are not your enemies. The enemy really is the carrier and the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid. Respectfully, I'm not asking you to hurt them or harm them. I'm not trying to ask you to be divisive towards them or say mean things to them. I'm asking you to begin understanding what the battlefield looks like and how you disseminate the enemy. And that is who the enemy is. And we have to work together to get that done. We can't do it alone.
Let me speak to the reality of this, okay? Because we're talking about doctors getting together and whatnot. And the long and the short of it is that, most doctors don't have any type of business background whatsoever. And Ben and I do have some experience in this. At one point, we were talking about creating an MSO. And I did look into this from a legal perspective and found that it could be done exactly the way you're saying it. And the thought of going to individual physicians' practices and trying to explain to them that this model would work is a bit daunting, number one. Number two, everyone wants something up front, right? The PE guys are going to them and saying, hey, we're going to give you a big chunk of money if you join us, and that's how we're going to do it. What can I offer? I can't offer them that big chunk of money up front. I can offer them, hey, if you come in under our MSO, we will eventually have a size where we can actually make a difference and maybe increase our reimbursements this amount, or get this done, or get that done. It's a real if-come, and most physicians, because they have these other potential models that really, quite frankly, might not be as good, but are giving them something up front, it's very hard to compete against that. And there are business models that are really taking advantage of physicians across the country that are going and bringing in physician practices into these big MSO models. And guess what? The business people at the top of this are getting a bunch of money off the top of it, skiving a bunch of money off the top of it for themselves that otherwise would go to the
There's
physicians.
a lot of noise in this space, but for sure, a lot of noise.
Yeah, and so I think that's where the reality is on the ground in terms of trying to go this pathway. And I agree with you 100%. That's what we should be doing.
I love that you framed it in this is the reality, because it is. The doctors that joined us first, we call it MedMerge because they had a company called InfoMerge for 10 years. And one of the things that the kind of the leader said to me was, he goes, we went around our state, and these are surgeons, right? He goes, we went around our state and we went to see other doctors, and they basically told us to go kiss our ass. Right? And it's what you said. And they're like, but Dutch, you have more trust. Maybe they'll listen to you. Well, number one, they were doing everything the right way. The model needed some attention. Collaboratives, just as a general matter, are generally made of 3, 4, or 5 entities. So you might have a holding company up at the top. You might have an MSO. You might have an HR company. You might have a talent company. You might have a whatever, fill in the blank, right? To make it all kind of work structurally and make sure you're in compliance. Legal is very important. I tell people the difference between a healthcare startup and everybody else is that I start with legal. Period. End of story. Like, that's where you have to start. So, because that's the first question I get. Dutch, is this legal? Can we do it? And I'm like, well, here's 27 different opinions from 27 different lawyers in 27 different states. Do you want your lawyer to go through them? Like, how do you want to sort this out?
And then you have to limit liability at the level of the MSO. Because that's the other piece of this that's so different than most other businesses out there, is anything that a physician is felt to have done wrong and there's a legal matter involving, that kicks up to the parent company.
Yeah, I think you got to start letting docs see things. So one of the most powerful things I learned in undergraduate education was not my accounting class. It was my Finance 101 class, where we learned the power of time value of money. And so I start with that. I say, okay, let's take a look at your total insurance spend. And by the way, all of these things, these services, are just tools. I could care less about them, just like I care less about AI or a computer or even a microphone. What I really care about is the fact that 3 guys can get together and have a discussion. I don't care about the equipment, right? So I don't care about the services inherently. What I care about is what is the result of those services and what can they do for physicians and patients. So I think, when you look at this, you go, okay, can we put everybody on a single employer chassis for employee benefits? Yes, we did it this year. The reality conversation that you were just having is, do we need a large number of physicians to participate? The answer is no. The time value of money calculation is really important because you don't know, as a general matter, how much money you're giving away. Now, I'm gonna be dramatic in my example, okay? I'm gonna pick on neurosurgery and vascular surgeons because they have the highest, and OBGYNs have the highest med mal, all right? So neurosurgeons, vascular surgeons, and OBs pay a lot in medical malpractice. And if you say, okay, I'm going to take my med-mal insurance contributions, my premiums, and I'm going to put them into the market at the S&P 500. Let's call that 10.5%, just for fun, because that's the historical average. What's my nut at the end of 30 years? Well, I don't know off the top of my head. I can't do math that fast, but it's a big number. Let's call it $30 million for fun. Let's just call it that. Right? Well, how much of that could have been yours? Right? And remember what we talked about earlier, like it's not the conclusions you come to, it's asking more bleeping questions. Like we got to ask more questions and stop coming to conclusions. Okay, well, like let's do that with work comp. Okay, there's 16 lines of commercial insurance that you pay as a physician. Okay, well, do all of them because you're in private practice for 28 flipping years. Okay, I'm telling you, when I get to the end of this 8-slide deck, you know, your jaw drops because you go, wait, I gave away how much flipping money to these jagoffs? Like I gave them that much? Okay, Dutch, back to reality. How much can I actually keep? Well, that's where a wonderful answer comes out of my mouth. I learned it from all the great attorneys. It depends. But I can tell you this.
He loves that.
I can tell you this. The number's significantly higher than what you've gotten over the last 25 years. So it's really, the reality is, yes, it's all difficult. One, I didn't need a lot of docs to prove it. In fact, we'll have 2,500 at the end of this year, 2,500 physicians. And that's all I needed because 2,500 physicians, I'm going to give you a number, is almost worth $500 million in economic value. $500 million. And I'm not even exploiting anything. I'm not extracting anything. I'm a boring accountant that's going, okay, you pay a premium for the property that you cover on your medical practice, which includes an ASC. Your accreted portion of the ASC premium, by the way, right? And today you pay a premium, which is an expense. How do we convert that into an asset that's on the balance sheet? Now, you don't have to be good at business to understand the difference between an expense and an asset on the balance sheet. Like that's a pretty easy quadrant to figure out. So my goal over the next couple of years is to help doctors understand you are paying all of these premiums. How do we legally, and in compliance with all the good rules and laws, even the ones that are against us, how do we use those to create an economic force that cannot be stopped? Right? That's what I'm after. That's how we fix it.
So what I'm hearing, which I really like, is that yes, we need more fairness and transparency in pay, but you want doctors to own hospitals again, take that moratorium off. You want doctors to realize that there is a viable way to come together and act as a unit, to exert your will and in your part as a viable stakeholder in the medical game. I have a question for you, though. President Trump has put on the table, I'm going to give a large portion of the healthcare budget instead of to insurance companies, to the people in the form of HSA accounts yearly. It can only be used for medicine. Since there is a large disparity on what you can pay around your city and around the country, talk to us about what that may or may not do in terms of your plan, the way you see things rolling in terms of fairness for physicians and leading us back to a physician-led medical community.
Well, look, I think those are all great things the president's doing. I'm a big pro fan. I wouldn't say I'm a fan of HSAs. They really help financial institutions more than they help people. I think my inherent issue with HSAs is, why do we have HSAs in the first place? Why don't you just write a check and then let the American people do their thing? And, you know, there's a whole bunch of protectionists out there that are like, well, then people will just spend it on whatever they want. And I'm like, yes, that's the free market.
That's a free market. Exactly.
And they get to, and if they're on the side of the road and they're homeless, then I can say, well, hey man, that's not my responsibility. Like, you didn't do that. Take care of yourself. Be a grown-up.
I think we've gone far afield in this country in the last 30 years from personal responsibility.
100%.
And that's what you're talking about is you're talking about personal responsibility. I believe in that 100%. But we're so far away from that now in the public consciousness that I think it's a great point to bring up, though, and talk about.
Oh, 100%.
It's too easy to get elected by giving away, right? You're just going, okay, well, those poor people, they're not getting anything. You know, the rich should pay for it. It was their choice, but no, that's okay.
I mean, very few of them started out with anything. Most of them just took a lot of pain and a lot of beatings, and they made something of themselves, right? And so I'm sure that's another podcast that we could talk about for hours and hours. I think that the direct-to-patient market, so let's call it the deductible marketplace in the United States, physicians could have a great hand in fixing that. So let's call that $8,500 and lower, right? Anything that would be priced on a market basis in those prices. So not reimbursement. Like, what do you think you want for a balloonoplasty? If you do those, right? Like, what do you want for XYZ? What do you want for a physician visit? Right? If I had it my way, when I was running practices, I used to tell the docs, if I had it my way, you guys would get $1 for seeing a patient. And then we'd get all the money for the procedures. Just how I do it. But that's neither here nor there. So what I think would happen, and what I think I'm seeing, is with the rise of Claude Code, OpenClaw, and all of these wonderful AI orchestration companies, meaning companies that actually use the real AI, not tools that deliver AI. Those companies are building new widgets that are allowing patients to say, hey, I live in Denver, Colorado. I specifically live in Cherry Hill, and I want to see the price of every single ENT. And I want to know what it costs for a new patient visit. And if physicians are willing to give those prices out, which I think they would be in this HSA market that the president's trying to build, then I think you can create a very efficient market. And I think you can start pulling in lots of patients who wouldn't ordinarily come to you. And that's what I'm seeing. So I see a ton of direct-to-consumer apps that have been built over the last 10 years and failed miserably because no one participated. But I see that change. I see that change coming. In our collective, we are literally building Shopify-type sites for every single participant, be it surgical hospital, physician-owned hospital, community hospital, ambulatory surgery center. We're just building them anyway. And we're saying, hey, when the time is right, we'll publish these. And then if a patient wants to come see a doctor and it's $75 for to see a physician, or if it's $735, depending on who you see, right? At least it's out there and it's available. And I'm expecting that employers will use that data. Because remember, self-funded employers are cash payers. And they will use that data to help their employees find the best doctors at the right prices. And I think that's where we can win. I mean, I think there's a substantial market in the sub.
That requires transparency too, though, right?
Yes,
I mean,
it does.
Obviously, that is something extreme, and we don't have transparency right now. So it would be another one of the things that you would pull for as a change to provide real-time.
Well, the new files that are out, we can read. So I would use those as a basis. And then we have a ton of data from utilization from self-funded employers. I mean, we have all that. And so we can begin to kind of say, well, we think the price is around X. And so that'll help independent practice physicians go, okay, well, I can't be $100, but I can't be $700 either. $235 seems to be what's the going, like, we don't know because you can't have collusion, right? You can't see contracts. I can't see contracts.
That's what I mean. I mean, I think that should go away.
Oh, 100%. But we can begin to see that for sure.
Because I think that it makes it too difficult for anybody. I mean, I've just cursorily Googled that myself until I got with BAM AI. I didn't realize that data is out there, because when you just Google it, unless you have paid accounts with MGMA and other stuff, it's very difficult to get any sort of reimbursement or expenditure numbers and rely on them.
Hey, I only had to buy an analytics company.
Right.
And I had to get a bunch of guys to cooperate because I wasn't going to be able to buy it myself. I don't have that kind of jack.
Well, there you go.
So
That's
I was
what we
like,
gotta
hey,
do,
everyone,
just go out.
Yeah, everyone get together and let's buy this thing so we can understand it better. We can help people.
Yeah.
Well, I think if we try and just speak to the average doctor out there that that's trying to get through day by day, some of what we've talked about here, quite frankly, is likely kind of over their head, right? The average doctor out there isn't going to be the one that's going to put together this MSO. The average doctor out there isn't the one that's going to lobby Congress or that type of thing. But discussing purely from an accounting perspective, the two things that grow your practice, that contribute to growth, right, are going to be, number one, power, right, and the other, speed or momentum, right? So power is the power to set your price. So that's really, I guess, what you were talking with there is by changing the way that we look at this whole paradigm, can we change things so we can actually set our own price and not be subject to what the government tells us we have to walk away with. And then the other thing is momentum. So what can we change such that we're driving more to our practices? And the problem is that the average physician is just sitting there doing their same old thing, and something new might come along, and they might incorporate that into their practice. They might not incorporate that into their practice. But I think that's where, when you're talking about bringing doctors together, when the one thing that I will say when we're looking at larger groups is, a lot of times the larger groups, when there's something new out there, they can embrace that and expose the whole group to it, such that that momentum can shift. Okay, yeah, well, the reimbursement for X is going down, but hey, the reimbursement for Y is really high right now, and there are a lot of people that want this. So we should shift towards that. So can you speak to how the average independent physician should look at their practice from both a power and speed, or power and momentum standpoint?
Yes. And by the way, I love the way you framed the question, because earlier when we talked, I said physicians are excellent at running a day-to-day operation. But if you ask them to think strategically, it's often difficult, right? Looking down is easier because you're looking down at the patient. You're trying to help them. But if you got to look up and out, like what's going to happen 6 months from now, a year from now, that's often difficult. And what I found was we built a direct contracting company, meaning employers contracting, bypassing carriers and contracting directly with physicians. I thought in 2008, and I really believe this, don't make fun of me. In 2008, I said, look, in 5 years, I'll have this thing whipped up. We had $3.2 trillion spend. I go, we'll have this down to nothing. I go, the physicians that I worked with, ASCs, we're going to fix this tomorrow. Okay. Well, that didn't happen, and it didn't happen. But the reason it didn't happen is because when I went to the practices, well, one, they were like, we don't even know what direct contracting means, and what kind of trouble are we going to get into with the carriers, and what's CMS going to say? So that was question number one. Question number two was, we don't even know what our costs are. How do we get a price? And number three, we only have so many employees. How do we have the bandwidth to actually deploy this thing that you want to do? And by the way, you may not, and I would tell them, I don't even know if I can get you a case. Right? We had some financial institutions in New York that hired us to figure this out in the kind of the tri-state area. And of course, I'm so honest, it's not even funny. I'm like, Doc, I don't even know if you're going to make $1. Like, I'm just trying to figure out how to help you win. Right? So you frame the question as such, like, how does an independent doc how do you even do it? Well, that's the reason large groups are better, or it's the reason like our little company, MedMerge, is great. Because now you've got 1,000 practices that can all deploy AI orchestration. They all can deploy new revenue cycle management ideas. They can deploy and just put the list of stuff. But they can do it because now there's some institution in the middle going, well, here's how we can deploy it into your practice. Like, here's how we can do it. Not you. Here's how we can help you and augment you, right? So I think that's important. And I think the second thing that you said that's really critical is, do physicians really care about any mechanisms? And I say this every single time, and I'm glad you brought it up. No one cares. Like, I learned about captives, which is an insurance company that you own, because we were building surgery centers. And when we got to the 10th one, somebody way smarter than me said, now, we're still paying premiums. Like, why don't we pay premiums to ourselves? Like, how do we do this like we do benefits? Like, how do we self-fund? And then, I was living in New York City at the time, and I had a really good friend that I smoked cigars with, and he was like, are you that big of a doofus? You've never heard of captives? right? And so all of a sudden you're learning. But if I sit in a seminar on a Saturday afternoon with a bunch of docs in downtown Dallas, do they really care about the structure of a captive? No. What they care about is getting their friggin' money back. And so, again, that's what companies like mine allow us to do. And I hope I'm not the only one. I think there'll be 100 med merges over the next 18 months. And that nothing would make me happier, right? Because I don't hold the golden ticket. I just think about things differently. But if I could say to docs, hey, your insurance costs across the board, commercial and benefits drop 30%. Well, that's pretty exciting on a Monday to tell the staff. Hey, staff, guess what? You have no copay, no deductible, no co-insurance, no pre-auths on your network. Well, how do we get that? Well, we join this collaborative, and that's the program they have. Oh, and by the way, our insurance costs dropped 30%. Oh, and by the way, our med mal and all this other stuff became an asset on the balance sheet. We have a balance sheet now. Well, what's a balance sheet, Doc? Well, let's talk about it next Monday. You know what I mean? Like all these things begin to happen because we begin to work together. And we're not constantly fighting each other. But your point about, does anyone care about? No, I don't care about the microphone, and I don't care about this camera that I'm looking at. I care about the fact that we're able to have a conversation over a 3-state geographical location and come together and say, well, what are the difficulties? What are the solutions? How do we push back on each other to get the best ideas, and how do we deploy them?
Well, I mean, to your point, Dutch, the driving force to all this is the complexity of it for the average doc. It's so complex that they're running for cover and want to go somewhere. The problem right now is that the organizations that are offering relief are not there to help. They're hospitals. They want to buy you up. They want to say, "Don't worry about it. I know it's all complex. Come on in here and it'll be better." Well, it's not better. And you know that. What you're saying offers a solution to the complexity in coalescing into a larger group that is actually designed to help the physician. And so that messaging is important to get out. I mean, you don't want to just say, well, this is really complex. We got to solve it. I have to join a bigger group. And you slide into a group that's not designed to help you at all, like a hospital system. But getting more systems out there like you're talking about that are physician-led and are designed around collectively bargaining for physicians, and getting the message to them that, yeah, you can solve a lot of these problems by coming into this type of organization, not into a hospital system or a PE group.
I think, Dr. Mandel mentioned it earlier, and it's one of the things we have to combat with education. PE does offer a nice bonus. Right. And so I understand the mathematics on PE very well. And so I explain it. I go, okay, you are getting cash that's really yours, but you're getting it all up front. What if I could show you a mechanism to do that wouldn't require you to go work for someone else and doesn't require you to be their slave or give up any autonomy? Because what independent docs want, at least from my vantage point, is autonomy and freedom, and not to be told what to do. And why would you give that up? Okay, because some guy just offered you $3 million. By the way, $3 million, a lot of money. Life-changing kinds of cash. A lot of people don't even retire with $3 million. It's a massive amount of money. Make no mistake. But when you look at PE math, you go, okay, well, they borrowed $50 million. They're going to put all the groups together, right? And then you're going to pay it back. They're extracting the $3 million from you. You just don't know how to get it. What if we could show you how? Right? That's a compelling argument. And that's how we combat this, because they're just able to financially rig it so they have the money. And what if our co-op, along with hundreds of other co-ops that I think will pop up, say, we figured out the math. Now, doctors are accused of not being great business people. I don't know if that's true, but I'll tell you what they are. They're really good at math. Like, I can put a lot of equations in front of a lot of docs and they go, I remember this. And guess what finance is? Finance is math. And when I put these calculations in front of people, it doesn't take them very long to figure it out. A lot of doctors are like, well, I went to work at the hospital. It was just safer. And I go, oh, well, they have a med mal captive. Guess what? You're contributing. They just took $75,000 out of the money you were going to spend and they invest it. And guess what happens when they invest it? They get a whole bunch of cash back. And yeah, they got 1,000 docs, but now they have a med-mal captive with 75,000 times 1,000. Well, what if you could just do that yourself? I mean, I think one of the points I want to get across is that everything is overcomable, but also the amount of intrinsic wealth that exists in a physician's office, they just have no idea. No one knows. And then when they see it, they go, holy mackerel, there's so much money in this deal. And that's how I think you convert physicians. And then I think the collaborative model works so strongly. It'll take a while in healthcare, but in 5 to 7 years, I don't think you'll see people go into health systems anymore.
That's what I'm hoping. I think the next 3 years are extremely important for our future. I mean, what happens with policy in the next 3 years is going to set us in the right or wrong direction for the next 10, I think.
How do we have the right policy if we don't have anybody advocating for us?
Well, I think that Trump's idea of at least instituting one thing that may steer us more towards a market economy again inside medicine is at least a step in the right direction. There's no comprehensive plan in place right now, though. Nobody's even talking about one. But at least that telegraphs to me that he's thinking about pulling it back into a market system, a system where you actually incentivize more efficient care.
I fully agree. I like the market-based work. My dear hope is that one day somebody in that darn administration will actually understand healthcare. We've had conversations in the White House, and I mean, what a privilege, what a joy, right? But then to be on the other side of someone who looks at you like, no, what does that mean? I don't understand. How does that work? What do you do? And you're like, wait a minute, you're a top official in the administration, and then the top officials at CMS. Yeah.
I've had breakfasts and lunches with actual senators and who are trying to make healthcare policy. And I tell them the most basic stuff that I've learned, and they have no idea what the bill they're about to vote on even says. I agree with you. I don't think anybody really understands. Again, all they're looking at is the money coming in and what ideas attached to the money. They're not thinking about what the implications of it are down the road.
Yeah, I'm hopeful that we'll get that rectified here soon. Hopeful.
How do you think that would happen?
Look, I think there's probably 50 people in the country that know healthcare policy, healthcare economics, right? The convergence of both, not medicine itself. That's a different category, and they need a bunch of help there. They don't have that either. And I've said that to a good number of the people in the administration. They're going to have to figure it out on their own. Every administration, if you're caught saying something negative, they don't like it. And it's like, well, you don't survive in battle if you just lie. Like, this is a battle for the heart and souls of American people. This is a battle for patients and taking care of them. Like, we got to start telling the truth, and we got to be okay with arguing until we get the best decision, not based on rank, but based on the best ideas. And look, I'm a firm believer that we could solve healthcare tomorrow. We just choose not to.
It's an amazing discussion. I'd like to close out with this question, just to for kind of the average doc out there, small practice. 3 things that they could do tomorrow to change the trajectory of their practice.
Number one, I think you ought to get involved with a collaborative somewhere. There's not just mine, there's others around the country. And that doesn't mean an MSO, and it doesn't mean a PEO. It means it covers the solutions that you're trying to solve. Be open to new ideas, right? Start understanding what your practice is worth. So what do you pay in all of your premiums? What are you losing by not using, Dr. Ben talked about AI BAM, but what are you losing by not talking about AI? What are you losing by not working with wonderful vendors who go, we We do revenue cycle management for 700 practices on a collaborative basis, not as a vendor supplier, right? So if I could give docs one simple thing, is that their solutions to all their challenges exist, but they're going to have to take, 2 hours a week and start really thinking about what their challenges are, and then who might be able to help them solve those problems. Because together we are much better than we are apart. And right now we're apart. And I think, as Dr. Ben said, I don't know why, but that 3 years has been on my brain for a while. And I'm like, I think it was last October, November, I was like, man, we have 36 months. That's what we have. And if we don't get our act together, we're done.
I feel that same pressure.
I feel it. Like every single day, it's exerted.
I think we have a window here, that we're at a crossroads. I can't fully explain why. I'm glad that you asked me, because it made me realize that this is more of a feeling than a factual basis. But I feel like we're at a real crossroads here, and I think a lot of American people feel the same way. I hear it from other people as well.
One of the things that's really pushing me hard is, in the last 6 months, I've heard from more senators, more representatives. I don't know anybody in the Silicon Valley. Now, I like a bunch of Silicon Valley guys. I lived there for 2 years. You name them, they've reached out to me. And I'm telling you, like, I've never called them. I kind of believe in that story where they say, don't sit by the king. But these guys have systematically reached out to me saying, like, hey, how'd you get interested in healthcare? What are you doing? Like, I know you're a venture capitalist and you're doing this and this and this. Like, tell us more. Healthcare is so complicated. And so I know that there's an urgency in the world that's saying, like, hey, we have to solve this problem or we are going to meet a bad end.
How does a doc find a collaborative?
You can call me and I'll help out. Somebody from our staff will help out. Look, I'm the anti-sales guy. So if you call me, you're not going to get anything to do with what we have or what services we have. You're going to get, like, well, what do you want? What do you want to do? And how do you want to do it? Like, what do you want in 5 years? Do you want to retire? Right? A lot of guys that sell to PE, they're just looking for a retirement vehicle. And the fact that it's going on the young guys, I mean, that's just, it's important, but it's not. And I'm not trying to make anybody feel bad. I mean, you should, but I'm not trying to make anybody feel bad. Just kidding. It's Sunday morning. I got to make some jokes. I mean, I got to lighten it up a little bit.
It's totally fine. I like it.
Dutch, another amazing conversation. We very much appreciate you coming on, laying out, again, not just what's wrong with the system, but potentially how we fix these problems. To our listeners, again, thank you for tuning in to another episode of Vital Discourse. If this conversation meant something to you, if it helped out, please share it. Share it with colleagues, share it with friends. We always appreciate that. And for myself and for Dr. Salento, Dr. Ben, we thank you for joining us on Vital Discourse.